BBC News now on BBC One Wales with Jane Hill.
Tonight, a personal letter from the Prime Minister. Gordon Brown writes to everyone targeted in the smear campaign suggested by his former special advisor. Police opened fire on anti-government protesters in Bangkok. In a day of violence, 2 people have died and at least 70 were injured. And the legendary music producer Phil Spector has just been convicted of murdering an actress. Hello, good evening. Gordon Brown has written personally to David Cameron and other Tories targeted in a smear campaign being planned by one of his closest political advisers. The Prime Minister called emails written by Damien McBride a matter of great regret and said anyone caught doing anything similar in the future would be sacked. Here's our political correspondent, Laura Koonsberg.
David Cameron, George Osborne and Conservative MP Nadine Dorries, all recipients of private letters of regret tonight, handwritten by the Prime Minister. Gordon Brown stopped short of answering calls for him to say sorry after his former advisor was caught making unfounded and obscene claims about senior Tories. But in a public letter, in response to the scandal, he expresses his regret. Writing to the country's most senior civil servant, Gordon Brown gives this assurance that no minister and no other political advisor had any knowledge of or involvement in these emails. And he says any advisor caught distributing notes like this should be sacked, saying the preparation or dissemination of inappropriate material or personal attacks have no part to play in the job of being a special advisor.
He's expressing great regret because he got caught. He brought those people into number 10 Downing Street. He employed them. He knew the sort of people they were. He knew the sort of way in which they went about their job. I don't say he knew specifically about these particular incidents, but he can have had no doubt at all that they were in the business of hatcheting anybody who got in their way.
So calls for an actual apology from Gordon Brown don't seem likely to disappear. But earlier, one of his senior cabinet colleagues said it was not his place to do so.
Gordon Brown had nothing to do with this. It was a private email exchange sent from one of his special advisors who is now gone, who went immediately on the spot. You apologise for things that you're responsible for. Otherwise, you make it absolutely clear what you think about this. And Gordon Brown has done that, and the person responsible has gone.
John Prescott's calling on links to be severed with Derek Draper, the self-styled unofficial Labour internet advisor who received the emails. Number 10's hopes of closing this story down are so far likely to be thwarted. Laura Koonsberg, BBC News.
Violent anti-government protests have continued all day in Bangkok. Soldiers opened fire on crowds in the country's capital this morning. The protesters responded by setting fire to buses and throwing petrol bombs. 2 people died and many dozens were injured. From Bangkok, here's Alistair Leithhead.
Fires burned on the streets of Bangkok as the army were finally sent in to break up the anti-government protests. They came early and reclaimed a main road blocked by the red-shirted demonstrators. Petrol bombs, rocks and bottles from the protesters. Harmless explosions from the military to try and scare the crowd away. But as a bus was set on fire, the troops moved. This was enough provocation for the rules to suddenly change.
Well, suddenly the army started opening fire with live rounds. They were trying to shoot above, but some of those bullets were being fired into the crowds. It scarpered the red shirts who've gone down here, and the military are now following them. They're firing down this alleyway just down here as well.
Then behind us, the protesters drove another bus at the troops. It started clashes on a second front. The red shirts were driven away. There were some serious injuries. The red shirts represent the poor. Their icon is Thaksin Shinawatra, the exiled former Prime Minister who improved their lives while alienating the elite and powerful.
The poor cannot get help, and then during my administration, the poor feel like, the democracy is really mean to them after being taken away.
The current Prime Minister said the military would be cautious, but order had to be restored. The focus then turned to Government House, the red stronghold. After dark, the locals turned on them, their momentum perhaps starting to stall. As the troops sat a short distance away, waiting for their chance to restore order. But at what cost will it come? Alistair Leithhead, BBC News, Bangkok.
Police in Nottingham have arrested 114 people suspected of planning an environmental protest at a coal-fired power station. Officers made the arrests after raiding a school in the early hours of this morning. Those held were questioned on suspicion of conspiracy to commit aggravated trespass and criminal damage at the Ratcliffe-on-Soar power station. President Barack Obama has congratulated the American military for rescuing a ship's captain who was taken hostage by Somali pirates. Captain Richard Phillips was freed after US Navy snipers dead 3 of the 4 hijackers holding him on a lifeboat. The United States is to ease its long-standing economic embargo on Cuba. A White House spokesman said Cuban Americans who've been restricted to 1 visit a year to the island will now be able to make unlimited trips and carry out money transfers to relatives there. In the last hour, the music producer Phil Spector has been found guilty of killing an actress at his Los Angeles mansion. Lana Clarkson was found shot dead at Spector's home 6 years ago. It was Spector's second trial on the charge after a previous jury failed to reach a verdict. Rajesh Mirchandani reports from Los Angeles.
This was the scene a few moments ago when music producer Phil Spector was found guilty of murder.
We, the jury in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Philip Spector, guilty of the crime of second-degree murder of Lana Clarkson.
A spectacular fall for a showbiz legend. He launched the careers of acts like the Righteous Brothers and is credited with virtually inventing the girl group. But by the mid-70s, Phil Spector's style was out of fashion and he was a recluse. He met Lana Clarkson at the nightclub in Los Angeles where the former B-movie actress was working. That night in 2003, surveillance cameras caught them leaving together, the last pictures of her alive. Spector invited Miss Clarkson back to his mansion for a drink. Hours later, she lay dead in the lobby, shot through the mouth. 2007, a very public murder trial. Spector looked every bit the erratic mogul, as prosecutors claimed he was hot-tempered and had threatened women with guns before. The defense said a depressed Lana Clarkson killed herself. Jurors couldn't agree who pulled the trigger.
At this time, I will find that the jury is unable to arrive at a verdict and declare a mistrial in this matter.
2008, the retrial, the TV cameras largely gone, but for Spector still the possibility of life in prison. But this time jurors were told if they couldn't all agree on murder, they could consider involuntary manslaughter with a much lower sentence, or they could acquit. For 50 years, Phil Spector's music has influenced and touched millions, but what happened one night 6 years ago may define his legacy. Rajesh Mirchandani, BBC News, Los Angeles.
Well, you can see more on that story and all the day's national and international news throughout the evening and the night here on the BBC News channel. Now on BBC One, we join our news teams wherever you are. Good night.
Good evening. A Spanish man has been sentenced to 39 years in prison for murdering a Swansea couple on the holiday island of Fuerteventura. Juan Carmelo Santana was found guilty of killing Brian and Tina Johnson in the Canary Island resort 3 years ago. Ross Harris reports.
Tina and Brian Johnson's bodies were found on wasteland near their villa in the town of La Oliva in July 2006. They'd moved to Fuerteventura in 1997 and let out an apartment to make some extra money. They'd previously run this pub in Mumbles before moving to the Canaries to open a bar with friends. Juan Carmelo Santana, who was their tenant, admitted killing them during his trial. He said he attacked Tina Johnson with a hammer, bludgeoning her to death when she came to collect the rent. She'd refused his offer of €1,000, half the amount he owed the couple. He killed Brian Johnson shortly after when he came looking for his wife. But the 42-year-old insisted he was not in control because he was high on cocaine and magic mushrooms. The jury rejected that argument and found him guilty. Santana's now been sentenced to 39 years in jail, 17 for Tina's murder and 22 for that of her husband, which the court decided was more brutal. Santana has also been ordered to pay €300,000 compensation to the Johnsons' only son, Sam. Santana is likely to be declared insolvent, but has promised to spend the rest of his life working in prison to pay Sam Johnson the money. The judge rejected a motion to make the Spanish government liable for payment instead.
The biggest teaching union in Wales and England is calling for a 10% rise in pay. At the NUT conference in Cardiff, its president, Martin Reed, said the UK government should hang its head in shame because young teachers were leaving the profession and struggling to make a living. The government says teachers' pay and conditions have never been better. Firefighters say a blaze at a block of flats in Llandudno appears to have started deliberately. 11 people were brought to safety by emergency services on Curzon Road in the early hours of this morning. Fire officers say the alarm in the building had been switched off after a number of false alarms. Police have made a fresh appeal for information exactly 4 years after a 16-year-old girl was attacked in Hengoed. Detectives say the incident was sexually motivated and happened on Pottery Lane in the village. A blood-stained hammer and a zip-up jacket were found at the scene. Officers in Cardiff are studying CCTV images after an armed robbery at a shop at the weekend. It happened in the Gabalva area of the city. A worker was threatened with a gun and £130 was taken from the till. Football, and Cardiff City kept their automatic promotion hopes alive with a 3-1 win over Burnley. The victory also does Swansea City a big favour. Roberto Martinez's team beats Barnsley 3-1, leaving them just 4 points behind the final playoff place. It was a close encounter at Ninian Park. Cardiff's defence was tested several times, with Burnley's Chris Eagles causing the home side problems throughout. Cardiff City had chances too, Ross McCormack failing to score on this occasion. It was goalless for most of the match, but as the players tired, the game opened up, and Ross McCormack linked up well with strike partner Jay Bothroyd to put Cardiff in front. But they must have thought they'd squandered the points when Darren Pearce gifted Burnley the ball, Robbie Blake scoring with just minutes to go. But Cardiff hit back within seconds, Ross McCormack putting the Bluebirds in front again. With Burnley chasing the game, McCormack got another, scoring his 19th league goal of the season to seal the win. Swansea, meanwhile, have got to keep on winning if they're to reach the playoffs, and Ashley Williams gave them the best possible start. Jordi Gomez doubled their lead, and the prolific Jason Scotland added a third, his 20th of the season. Other results went Swansea's way, and Roberto Martinez's team are now just 4 points behind the final playoff place. The Bluebirds are virtually guaranteed a top 6 finish, and they could still reach the second spot and secure automatic promotion. While in the Blue Square Premier, defeat to Altrincham means Wrexham won't be returning to the Football League for another year at least. Rugby League now, and the Celtic Crusaders are still looking for their first win in the Super League. They lost to Harlequins by 40 points to 18. A look at tomorrow's weather now. A cloudy start with a little rain in places. It should be mostly sunny by the afternoon, top temperature 13 degrees Celsius. Jane James will be here with the latest for you in breakfast from 6:25. That's Wales Today from me. Good night.
Evening. I doubt if you've just had 4 days of clear blue skies and warm sunshine, but you must have had at least some, and there's more to come this coming week. But it's not alone. At the moment, the focus is on some fairly heavy rain running through Cornwall and Devon on a line of an old frontal system that will continue to drift slowly eastwards and become slightly weaker overnight. The legacy of what kept 3 days of greyness in the The home counties is now up the northeast of England and Scotland. It's overcast and grey here. All of that prevents much of a frost tonight. And where there will be sunshine tomorrow, it'll be quite warm. Well, that sunshine won't be everywhere. First of all, the consideration of this line of rain. It dies out, but doesn't disappear completely. The cloud burns back to the coast in many places, not all. Showers develop in increasing warmth in the east of England. 18 degrees is possible in London, 64 Fahrenheit, 13 to 15 elsewhere. Now, tomorrow night might be more interesting still. The warmth doesn't really go away from southeast England. We import more humid air and big showers, possibly thunderstorms, a bunch running through the Midlands on their way northwestwards. So a frost-free night. In fact, frost is not a concern this coming week. Wednesday itself, yes, we've got that far, takes the showers beyond, across the Irish Sea to Northern Ireland, and then afterwards, much of the cloud disappears from England and Wales, and it looks as though it could be quite warm in the sunshine. But for both Wednesday and Thursday, from the Humber northwards, there's a big influence on what you feel up here. A strong and cold easterly wind will keep the east coast and beyond particularly cold, but western Scotland should do very well. Good night.